to have people coming in. Welcome, everyone.
The International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.
Good morning and good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to this edition of QVC Coaching. Coaching the present, shape the future. It is wonderful to see so many people who have joined us today from around the world. This is our fifth QVC Coaching, and we are just excited to be here. I would like to embrace this multicultural encounter and let you know that we're having simultaneous translations in 3 languages right now: English, Spanish, and Chinese. We will show you in a minute on the screen how you can connect your interpretation channel. Do we have it? I can also show you here. Let me share. So I'm sharing in the screen. The French channel, it's not going to be used right now. We're going to be using English, Spanish, and Chinese. And all you have to do is go down to your control of the Zoom and find the translation icon, this red one here, and click on it, and then you can choose your language. You will hear the original language in the background and the translation. So you can mute the original language if you want, and you can cancel the translation anytime.
Hi, and a very warm welcome to QVC 2022. This is a flagship program to support all coaches and learners worldwide. And these dialogues become far more significant now because we seem to be going through a very interesting phase in coaching. Perhaps we are at an inflection point that invites us to craft the future of coaching through the lens of hope, innovation, and as global citizens, keeping humanity at the heart of these initiatives. So our topics this year has been specially curated to invite possibilities. With this spirit in mind, QVC 2022 is a call to action for all of us to collaborate and co-create in focused communities. We wish to start IAC member forums in the areas of education and climate action. Both of these are topics that are so beautifully aligned to the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you all for joining in. Enjoy these sessions, and a very big thank you to all the wonderful panelists and moderators, the support team, and all the volunteers who bring in such amazing levels of passion and commitment and professionalism in making this happen. Welcome to QVC 2022.
So welcome, and again, if you're not using yet your interpretation channel, you can click the icon and choose your language. So today we are having 3 world-class panelists with us, and they will share their thoughts and opinions on a very interesting topic: coaching the present, shaping the future of leaders. And when we say leaders, these can be organizational leaders or volunteer leaders, such as those who volunteer for the IAC and who make wonderful things like this QVC coaching happen. And even those self-leaders who innovate in a new hybrid world. All these leaders must interact with intercultural and intergenerational teams in the digitalized landscapes of today. So without further delay, we will start with our first panelist today, which is Gillian Carlotti. Some of you may know him. Mr. Gillian Carlotti is coach and mentor of leaders. He coaches high-performance teams, professional soccer teams, athletes, and executives of multinational companies. He's also our IAC Vice President, and Mr. Carlotti is also IAC Certified Coach. Mr. Gillian will speak to us on the relationship between leadership, values, and influence. Gillian, welcome. Please, the space is yours.
Gracias, Ingrid, por esta amable presentación.
Thank you, Ingrid, for this great introduction.
Es un honor estar aquí y compartir con
It's an
todos
honor
ustedes
being
en
here,
donde quiera
sharing
que
with
se
all of
encuentren.
you, wherever you are.
Antes de comenzar, quisiera dedicar un
Now, before
minuto
we
para
start, I would like to dedicate
felicitar
1 minute to
a
congratulate
todo el equipo que hizo posible
the
QVC
entire
Coaching.
team that made possible QVC Coaching.
Han sido largas jornadas de
It has been
planificación, coordinación y
long days
ejecución.
planning and coordinating and executing.
En uno que otro momento ha habido momentos de estrés,
one
pero
time
el
or the
espíritu
other,
de voluntariado
we've been tired, but that spirit of volunteering
y la decisión
and that
de
decision
llevar
of
QVC Coaching adelante como un
taking
compromiso de toda
forward
la IAC
QVC Coaching
hizo
as a
posible que
commitment
estemos
for
acá
the entire
compartiendo
IAC, made it possible for us to be here
esperamos
sharing,
ameno
and
rato.
hopefully it's going to be a good time for everyone.
Conversar de coaching y de
Now, talking
liderazgo
about
en el
coaching
escenario de
and
IAC
leadership
es muy
in
complejo.
the scene of IAC, it's very complex.
Básicamente porque somos una organización de
Basically, because
voluntariado
we're an organization of volunteers.
y eso significa que alrededor del
This
mundo
means that around the world,
tenemos líderes coaches
we have coaching
haciendo
leaders
dinámica nuestra organización.
making our organization dynamic.
Comienza tal vez fundando un capítulo en una ciudad donde
Perhaps
no
it starts
existe
in creating a chapter in a city where we don't have one,
o liderando un comité en uno de
or
esos
perhaps
chapters.
leading a committee in one of those chapters.
Y luego puedes pasar a ser
And then
el
you can
coordinador
go on to become
regional de
a
capítulos
regional
o
coordinator of
participar
a
en un comité
chapter or
global.
participate in the global committee.
Puedes ser invitado al comité de
You can
gobierno
be a
de IAC.
guest in the governance committee
E
for
incluso en un
IAC.
momento dado formar parte del comité
Even at one point,
ejecutivo.
you can become part of the executive committee.
Cuando les digo esto, internalizo que al
When
mismo
I tell you
tiempo
this, I
somos
internalize
una
that at the same
organización de
time,
liderazgo,
we're an organization of leadership,
porque es el liderazgo en
because
cada uno de
it's
esos
leadership in
capítulos y en cada uno
each
de
of
esos
those
comités lo que hace
chapters
que seamos
and
una organización
each of
viva.
those committees that makes us a live organization.
Así que mi mensaje
So,
para todos esos
my
líderes
message
alrededor del mundo es
to all
que
those leaders
lo que
around the
están
world is that
haciendo,
what you're
su
doing,
entrega, su dedicación, su compromiso y su
your
energía
commitment, your
es
energy,
sinceramente apreciada.
it's truly appreciated.
Entonces vamos al tema de hoy,
So,
cómo el coaching
moving on to the topic
impacta en
for
los
today,
líderes y
how
moldea
coaching
las
impacts leaders
organizaciones.
and models organizations.
Stephen Hawking solía decir que
Mr. Hawkins used to say that
cuando un descubrimiento aparece y
when
lo cambia
a
todo
discovery comes up and changes everything,
y tenemos la capacidad
and we
de
have
adaptarnos,
that capacity of adapting,
esa adaptación puede ser
that
considerada un logro.
adapting could be considered an achievement in itself.
Y a ese logro debemos llamarlo
And that achievement,
inteligencia.
we should call it intelligence.
En los últimos 2 años nuestra inteligencia ha sido
Over the
probada.
past couple of years, our intelligence has been tested
Como civilización e incluso
as a
personalmente.
civilization and even at a personal level.
COVID, la pandemia cambió
COVID,
todo.
the pandemic changed everything.
Transversalmente el mundo tuvo que
Transversally, the world
producir
had
una
to
respuesta adaptativa
produce an
emergente.
adaptive answer emerging.
Solamente voy a utilizar un
And
dato para poder
Only
expresar esto en números.
using one data point to
Zoom,
really
la
relate
plataforma
this.
que usamos hoy para
Zoom,
comunicarnos,
the platform we use today to communicate,
en diciembre del 2019
in
hizo
December
10 millones de
2019,
transmisiones.
made 10 billion transmissions.
en abril 2020
In April 2020,
hizo 200 millones de transmisiones.
it made 200 million transactions,
Es decir, este equipo tuvo
meaning
que
this team
adaptar
had to adapt
la circunstancia y
the
crear una
circumstances
respuesta.
and create an answer.
Eso nos pasó a todos.
This happened to us all.
Todavía hoy retumba en mis oídos la declaración
today,
de un
it
cliente
Resounds in my ears what
cuando
a client
empezaban
said
los días del
when
trabajo en
the
casa
days
diciendo,
work from home started, saying
hemos perdido
we've lost
la oportunidad de llegar a
that
casa cada
opportunity
noche,
of
abrir la
coming
puerta,
home each night,
suspirar y
opening
decir
the
hogar,
door,
dulce hogar.
taking a breath and saying home sweet home.
Recientemente, su declaración era,
Recently, his
descubrí
statement was,
que
I
hay un lugar en
discovered
el mundo al que
that
pertenezco y
there's
que
a
me
place in the
pertenece,
world that I belong to and that belongs to me,
donde ocupamos un espacio, mi
where we
esposa y mis hijas,
occupy
para
a
hacer
space,
familia.
my spouse and my children, to make family.
Así que me gusta utilizar el término
So
de
I
que
like
los
to use the
líderes
term that
y las
leaders
personas debemos
and
metabolizar los
people
cambios.
should metabolize changes.
Y todas estas respuestas adaptativas deben
And all
producirse
these
con el cliente
adaptative answers
como
should
centro de todo lo que es la
happen
transformación
as the
digital.
center of everything that's digital transformation.
En la era digital que está
In the
basada en
digital
el
era
componente
that's based
analógico
on
más
the
importante jamás
analogical
creado,
component that's the most important one ever created,
el ser humano,
human beings.
conectar es lo más
Connecting
importante.
is the most
Entonces,
important
5
thing.
cosas que
So
quiero mencionar
5
acerca de
things
lo
that
que
I
es mi
want to mention
experiencia,
about what
acerca
my
de lo que
experience
el
is
impacto que produce el coaching
about
en los
the impact
líderes.
produced by coaching in leaders.
Número 1, el coaching
Number 1,
ayuda a tener
coaching
conciencia
helps
del carácter del
to have
líder.
consciousness of the character of the leader.
Temperamento es algo que se hereda, carácter es algo que se forja.
Temperament and something inherited. Character is something that you create.
El carácter nos define y es una elección personal.
Character defines us. It's a personal election. It's a personal
Los
choice.
niveles de influencia de un
The
líder
levels of
están
influence of a leader
estrictamente
are
determinados por
strictly
los
determined
límites
by
a
the
donde su
limits
carácter lo llevan.
to which its character takes them.
Cuando un líder es capaz de
When a leader is
conscientemente
capable
operar
of
desde sus
consciously
valores,
operating from his values,
obtiene la posibilidad de ser
they gain that
predecible.
possibility of becoming predictable.
Predictibilidad es una posibilidad
Predictability
para
is
un
a
líder con
possibility
carácter.
for a leader with character.
Y allí comienza la conexión con los
And
seres
there,
humanos.
that connection with human beings starts.
Como metáfora gráfica podríamos
As a graphic
definir el
metaphor,
carácter como
we
una
could define
roca.
character as a stone, as a rock.
Los niveles altos de congruencia
High
permiten
levels of consistency allow
que el carácter del líder pueda
for the
ser visto como
character
una
of
roca.
the leader to be seen as a rock.
Es su fortaleza más importante.
It's his most important strength.
Al mismo tiempo, esta roca puede tener
And
algunas
at the same
grietas.
time, this rock would have some cracks.
Es muy difícil
very
tener una
difficult
condición de
To
líder
have
donde nos
a
consideremos
condition of a
perfectos.
leader where we consider ourselves perfect.
Cuando nos podemos considerar
When we can
perfectibles y somos conscientes
consider
de
ourselves
nuestras grietas,
able to be perfected and are conscious of our cracks, of our gaps,
entonces aparece la vulnerabilidad.
then we see vulnerability appear.
Y un líder con carácter
And a
y
leader with
vulnerabilidad
character and vulnerability
genera climas de confianza.
generates a climate of trust.
En consecuencia, el punto número 2
In
es la
consequence,
seguridad.
point number 2 is safety or security.
Un clima de confianza permite
A
ambientes
climate
de
of trust
seguridad.
allows for environments of trust,
Y
of
todos
security.
sabemos que en un clima
And we all
de
know that in a
seguridad,
climate
el
of
potencial y las
security,
capacidades del ser
the
humano se
potential and the
expanden.
capacities of human beings expand.
Esa seguridad que da
That
el
security
carácter y la vulnerabilidad al
character
líder
and
se transmite al
vulnerability
equipo.
to the leader is transmitted to the team.
Y eso reduce los niveles de miedo del
That
líder.
reduces that level of a fear in
Los
the
líderes
leader.
que operan desde el
Now,
miedo
leaders
se
that
convierten en autoritarios,
operate from fear,
excluyentes y
become
tóxicos.
authoritarian, excluding people, and become toxic.
Los líderes que operan desde la seguridad
Leaders that
aman la
operate from
transparencia.
security and safety
Convocan a
love
los mejores
transparency.
líderes.
They call on
Convocan
the
a los
best
mejores
leaders.
talentos.
They call on the best talent.
Los desarrollan
They
y al
develop
mismo
them,
tiempo los
and at the
empoderan.
same time, they empower them.
Y ahí podemos ir desde el extremo de
And
ser
there we can move
excluyentes
from the
al
extreme of
extremo de
being
ser incluidos.
excluded to being included.
Entonces, en la
So,
era del trabajo híbrido,
that era of hybrid work,
donde trabajamos a distancia,
where we work
donde conformamos
remotely,
equipos intergeneracionales,
teams with different generations,
donde la generación X tiene
where
que
Generation
aprender
X
a
has to
convivir,
learn
a
how
congeniar,
to
a hacer equipo
live
con los
with
millennials y
and
los
make team
centennials.
with millennials and centennials.
Conexión es determinante.
Connection is determined here.
Lo mismo sucede con los equipos
Same thing happens
interculturales.
with intercultural teams.
IAC es un gran ejemplo de un equipo
IAC is a great
intercultural.
example of an intercultural team.
Si pudiésemos ver una reunión
If
del
we could
comité
see a
de
meeting of
gobierno, del
the
consejo de gobierno,
governance committee,
veríamos 13, 15
the governance
países
council,
distintos
we would see
representados,
15 different countries represented there,
dando una mirada global
giving a
nuestra
global
organización.
perspective to our organization.
Volviendo a la seguridad,
Now, coming back to safety.
la seguridad produce conexión.
Safety produces connection.
Y ahora en el punto 3,
And
la
on point
influencia
number 3
es
now, influence
una
is
consecuencia del
a
carácter más la
consequence
seguridad.
of character and security.
La influencia no es algo que se pide, no es algo
Influence
que se
is not something
solicita, es
that's
algo que
asked,
se nos
it's not
otorga.
something that's requested, it's something that is granted.
Cuando puedo reconocer el
And I'm
carácter
able
del
to
líder
recognize the character of the leader
y relacionarme
and
con un ambiente de
relate
seguridad,
with an
entonces le
environment of
otorgo
safety, then
influencia.
I grant influence.
La influencia es
And influence
directamente proporcional
is
al nivel de
directly
liderazgo en
proportional
el que
to the level
operamos.
of leadership in which we operate.
El cuarto punto tiene que ver con que el coaching mantiene al
The fourth
líder
point has to do
enfocado
with
en su
coaching,
misión y su visión
keeping the
personal
leader focused on its personal mission and vision,
y la interrelaciona
and that it interrelates with
con la visión y la misión de la
the
organización.
mission and that vision of the organization.
Encontramos que los líderes que operan
We find
desconectados
leaders
de la
that
misión y la
operate
visión
disconnected from the mission and vision.
empiezan a mirar el pasado.
They start looking at the past.
Y cuando están mirando el pasado es muy difícil
And when you're looking at the
establecer
past,
las
it's very
prioridades del
difficult to
presente
establish priorities for the present
y tener una visión del futuro.
and to have a vision for the future.
En el pasado podemos encontrar
In the past, we
experiencia
can
y sabiduría.
experience and wisdom.
Y esa experiencia y sabiduría nos
And that
permite
experience and that wisdom allows us
encontrar las maneras de
to
no
find
repetir errores.
ways of not repeating mistakes.
En el presente
In the
hacemos todas
present,
las acciones necesarias para
we make all the
materializar la
necessary
visión
actions
y
to
la misión.
materialize the mission and the vision.
Cuando nos desconectamos
When we
de esa
disconnect
visión y misión y
from that
miramos el
mission
pasado,
and that vision and look at the past,
empezamos a ser
we start
personas,
becoming
equipos y organizaciones
people,
introspectivas.
teams, and organizations that are introspective.
Nos aislamos de las necesidades
We
reales
isolate ourselves from true needs.
y lamentablemente las organizaciones se
And
vuelven
unfortunately,
epidérmicas,
organizations become epidermic,
hostiles y
hostile,
desarrollan culturas
and they
feudales,
develop feudal cultures.
donde cada espacio de poder se convierte en una
each
trinchera.
Place of power becomes a trench.
El punto 5 tiene que ver con las aptitudes y las
Point number 5
actitudes.
has to do with attitudes and aptitudes.
El coaching permite al líder crear un balance
Coaching
entre el
allows the leader
saber
to
hacer
create
y
a
el saber
balance
ser.
in knowing how to do and knowing how to be.
Ese balance
This
hace
balance
posible
makes it possible
que el líder sea cercano.
for the leader to become close.
Desde allí, desde ese balance es que se
And
pueden
from that
construir
balance is
verdaderas
where you can
relaciones y
create
comunicación
true
profunda.
relationships and deep communication.
Desde allí, los líderes pueden
From there,
entablar
leaders can
conversaciones valientes.
have courageous conversations.
Y con esto quiero decir que
And
pueden
with this,
abordar
I mean that they can
temas difíciles y
approach
complejos
topics that are difficult and
en
complex
un escenario de respeto
in a scenario of respect
con su equipo sin afectar la
with their
moral del
team
mismo.
without affecting the morale.
En esta era
In this era
de la digitalización,
of digitalization,
cambiar la cultura de las
changing
organizaciones,
the culture of organizations,
crear una cultura que dé
creating a
respuesta
culture
al desafío
that
digital y que dé
answers
respuesta al
that
desafío
digital
humano.
challenge and answers the
Como
human
nunca
challenge.
antes aplica la frase de
As
Carl
ever
Jung,
before, Carl Jung's phrase is applicable here.
aprende todas las técnicas, todas las
Learn all the
metodologías,
techniques, all methodologies,
pero cuando estés frente a un ser humano,
but
sé
when you're in
solamente
front
un
of a
ser
human
humano.
beings, be just a human being.
Este es mi aporte en esta parte de
This is
nuestra
what
conversación
I
de hoy.
wanted to share
Gracias.
in this conversation today. Thank you.
Excelente, excelente, Gillian. Muchas gracias.
Excellent,
Tan
Gillian.
excelente
Thank you very much for
mensaje.
such a great
Quiero,
message.
resaltar el
I want to
enfoque
highlight the
sistémico de lo que nos has
that
dicho
systemic
hoy,
focus of what you
cómo
told us today
con solo
and
trabajar
how
los valores,
with just working on the
me acabo de dar
values,
cuenta que estoy hablando en español.
I just realized
I'm
I'm
sorry.
speaking in Spanish. Sorry.
I like the systemic approach of your presentation today, Gillian. You have spoken how our values are connected to so many other things that allows you to have security that allows you to influence others, and it's all systemic. It's just working one thing, you get all of these other things. So great messages and many others too, but I wanted to emphasize on that one. Thank you so much. Great. So now we're going to keep inviting the next guest today, or next panelist, who is Betsy Martinez. I'm sure many of you know her. She's a well-known influencer in our region. Betsy is a conscious business coach with a specialty in positive psychology. She's a member of the board of governors of IAC and coordinator of the Global Committee of Chapters. She's also an IAC Master's practitioner. And Betsy Martinez will talk to us today about how the relationship between actually compassionate and conscious leadership. So without further delay, Betsy, welcome. The space is yours.
Gracias, enorme gusto.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure being here today in this Quo Vadis and second Quo Vadis coaching for this year with my colleagues Brian and Gillian, and with you, Ingrid. I would like to set our eyes on the title of today that Quo Vadis calls us How Coaching Strengthens Leaders and Shapes the Future of Organizations, and invite all of us here to put our sight particularly in this phrase of shaping the future. Coaching is a empower of leadership that allows us how could I shape that future and contribute in organization, and how we approach it really in those processes of coaching. I would like to fragment a little bit that topic of what it is shaping the future really. To do it, for me particularly, we have to talk about consciousness. Consciousness that actions, decisions that organizations and the leaders are making today will have a direct impact in the way and the shape that future will have, and the consciousness that we're truly in an era with several stages never imagined before. Just to mention three: the pandemic crisis of 2020 that made organizations learn different skills, or that rupture that humanity faced, mentioning even in an emerging way to a herd collective as humanity has been in this recent time. It made it definitely towards that rupture that we're living, and I like to call it that way, that we talk right now in seeing it as a rupture that happened in humanity, and that happened in 2020, just around the corner. But 3 years later, even during the pandemic, we can no longer speak, from my perspective, in organization as a rupture. And I would like to propose to start talking within the organizations with rebuilding or recuperating. And that requires more challenging skills than the ones that we had during the rupture 3 years ago. And the third element that comes to mind is that these two moments that I've cited, that rupture and that invitation to recovery, I consider they have put the organizations in a need of opening conversations or questions that perhaps are a lot more pungent, more provocative. And the way in which this are going to shape that future and strengthening the leadership within them, we are talking right now about a new normal. We hear it every day, but the truth is that we still are missing in organizations gain consciousness of how we're going to shape a future that we don't still yet understand. We are still in a very palliative way, and we are still going through this world crisis without truly understand how this future is being seen. And it calls my attention to the last McKinsey report of 2021, this data point that I'm going to share. 100 million people were being forced to change their occupation in 2030. That's the projection that McKinsey does. And these people, these 100 million people, will be replaced by the technological acceleration. They will be switching, and particularly because of the pandemic crisis, they'll be uh, moved by e-commerce, remote work that is changing a lot the way we work in organizations, and also an impact that we're seeing in climate change, and of course the new learning and knowledge changes that we have. Now, after fragmenting this reality, according at least how I see it, I believe also that we have an opportunity of rebuilding organizations, and possibly these organizations that are stale have the opportunity now of becoming learning organizations, to be part of that future, not only to shape it, but also to subsist in the future. And here's where, for me, coaching has its peak, its summit opportunity, where we can foster leaders of exponential thinking within organizations and take them out of that linear thinking that they had. For me, this is an inflection point where organizations have the opportunity of helping create a new mindset to innovate, for example, for a leadership that's more conscious, a lot more compassionate, a lot more humane. In other words, of creating a conscious capitalism within organizations where the purpose becomes the center of the strategy, where consciousness for the environment becomes the center of the strategy, and where well-being and mental health of people are also as important as the profit. at the gross profit. This is a calling that companies and triple balance are doing nowadays, and that transforming power of coaching truly allows a change in perspective that for me is more potent than before. We face questions within the organization's conscious and compassionate leadership that I'd like to propose that we ask ourselves what skills are required to develop leaders that can face that future. How will the organizations be impacted in face of an environment that's in recovery, no longer in rupture? How can we or will we be resolving those great problems of this future? With those questions in mind, it's very serious for me. We coaches are invited to assume a collective answer to shape ethically and consciously this future. And we are totally clear that we cannot predict a future, but we can design how we want to live in that future. And for me, coaching is an articulator to design that. I have the hope that in organizations, they are understanding that we don't have time and we shouldn't be tolerant and perpetuate ancient leaderships, stale organizations, as I call them, and open ourselves in that space to an innovation. Here's where coaching can be a great ally of this design for the future. And how can we contribute? And I'll close with this. How can coaching contribute to shape the organizations in this new era, in this future, accompanying with a new mentality of innovation for the leaders? Just to name a few, accompanying leaders to have a bravery in exploring in what truly is known as the associative thinking of our clients, of our leaders in organizations, accompanying to evidence those blind spots where limit that linear thinking and don't allow that exponential thinking, strengthening a leadership that's a lot more compassionate, more humane, because it's the only way in which we can face the ambitious challenges that that future is showing, helping create possibilities in organizations, because never, ever, never in the history of humanity, the present has been so temporary as today. Facilitating in the focus of learning where exponential technologies are complementary forces with the human condition instead of being opposing forces that it appears to be today. Helping build that fine thread in organizations that are more inclusive, more just, more diverse and responsible. Coaching, for me, is a path of example. And anchoring this experience to support organization is a way of helping build that future. And like how Fred Kaufman expresses one of the references in conscious leadership and compassionate leadership, and he cites a phrase that says that coaching is like listening the song of the other and together create a new melody. For me, and I hope that for you too, it's a privilege being a coach in this era today where we really are allowed to build and design in a better way that future, don't you think?
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you so much. I do believe it, uh, definitely, and it's impactful to hear you speak about how stale organizations need to move towards the future and shape that future, and the huge responsibility leaders have, and how many of them are probably not even aware of this responsibility of searching for this higher purpose and shaping the future for them, for their teams, for the organization, and for the world. And being more inclusive, it's a key element in this technology area if we want a better world. We cannot have people who are excluded from this new era and this new future. So thank you so much for this inspirational approach. Excellent. So our third panelist today, it's Brian French. Brian is a leadership creator, teacher, and coach who serves corporate clients around the world. He's the author of the book, Harmonic Leadership, Leading with Inclusive Mindful Caring. Brian is an IAC certified coach and serves on the board of governors, and he has recently been named as second vice president of IAC. Brian is going to speak today about a central theme of care, which, as I understand, is a balanced, mindful, caring model for leaders. Brian, welcome to this edition of Quo Vadis. The space is yours.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, and thank you to Gillian and Betsy. Wonderful, wonderful messages. It's hard for me to follow that. I was taking so many notes, I wasn't concentrating on what I'm going to say. So let me gather myself for just a moment. And as Ingrid shared, I wrote a book recently. I've been coaching leaders. I've been facilitating leadership programs for more than 30 years. And through that time, I've taught a lot of different theory. I've coached leaders in many different ways, and I've noticed the last 5 or 6 years that things have evolved. I used to coach on how to manage work and people to get things done. Then it transitioned into being an empathetic leader who displays emotional intelligence in the way that one leads others in the team. Now I'm spending more time coaching on how to be a mindful leader who has what I call a balanced approach while maintaining self-care as well. Being concerned with the emotional well-being of others, of the team, of the self, while still maintaining focus on the work. And when we consider the topic for today, how coaching strengthens leaders and shapes the future of the organization, I see this in continuing for the foreseeable future. Coaching to help leaders increase their global focus. Coaching to focus on environmental, social, and governance matters. Anjali, in her introduction, mentioned the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's coaching with that broad sense because every organization in the world, regardless of the work or the focus of that organization, is ultimately influencing those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Everything that we do as people, everything that we do as leaders influences the broader world in ways that we don't often recognize or may never know about. But we need to increase the awareness of how our actions within our organization affect that greater world. So Anjali also mentioned the work that we're starting to do with climate action. Climate action is goal 13 within the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're having a session on Friday that I would like to invite everyone to come to, where we will focus on coach's role in climate action. It's something that's very near and very dear to my heart, being an environmentalist by nature. So it's no longer just about the coachee or our client and helping them to learn and to grow in their career. It's now about helping the leader to open their eyes to the positive impact that they can make, not just within their team or within their organization, but in the broader world and in the ecology, not just in the human world, but in the natural world. Ingrid mentioned the book that I wrote, Harmonic Leadership. The subtitle is Leading with Inclusive, Mindful Caring. Inclusive is meaning to include all others equitably, having a global lens, a universal lens, embracing all people regardless of difference. Mindful is using mindfulness to be a balanced leader who is able to empathically recognize the needs of others and the needs of the situation. And then caring is having deep concern for all aspects of the leadership situation and taking care in how one leads in that situation. And as Ingrid mentioned in my book, I've focused on that thought of care as a central theme. And when we were deciding what our topic would be today and how we would approach the topic, my mind automatically went to care. Because as mentioned earlier, we used to focus more on the work aspects, and the people aspects were based around getting the work done. But that topic of care has expanded our definition of what it means to be a leader. So I did look up this morning the translations of the word care, and I'm hoping that the translator got this close. So I just pasted them in the chat box. And for those who are interpreting for us today, if you feel that it did not capture it correctly, please add to it in the chat box. Basically, care comes down to kindly providing for others and the situation, providing what is needed to someone or to something or to the situation. And each of us around the world have our own concepts of what that means and our own words to describe what that means. And each of us in the workplace have experienced a caring workplace, and most of us have likely experienced a non-caring workplace. So I'm going to invite you to think back to a situation, and I'm pasting this in the chat box without translation, apologies. But think back to a leader who you worked with who was very uncaring, a leader who did not show empathy, who did not show concern for others. And consider what that experience was like. And I would love to see some feedback in the chat box. What was it like to work within that experience with that uncaring leader? And thank you, Beatrice, for the better translation. So thinking back to that situation, thank you, Sakti, for getting us started. Very demoralizing. Thank you, CJ. Unengaged. You want to quit? Thank you, C. Norris or Norris. Ronald adds created fear. And Mario, you left the organization. And the research shows exactly what you were saying. Juan adds disengagement. Disengagement definitely is a result of this effect. There's been many research papers, surveys, reports out there that talk about the disengagement factor. Of course, we have our Gallup employment engagement factor that comes out with reports, and currently we're sitting at 21% globally in terms of employee engagement. I'm based in the United States, and here in the US, we're at 32%. And it's been right around 30% most of my career since they've been doing this survey. And it has gone down through the effects that the strain and stress that we faced in the world. One adds more accidents, turnover, absenteeism. There's a new term called presenteeism, where people are present, they're showing up at the workplace, but they're not actually working. Quiet quitting is another phrase that is becoming more common now. And this is the effect of a non-caring environment. So now I'm going to ask the other side of the question. I'm going to paste it in the chat box as well. Now think back to a leader who you worked with who was very caring. A leader who displayed empathy and concern for you and others. What was that experience like? Saraf starts with highly motivating. Ronald adds enabling. Wonderful words. There was engagement and commitment. Thank you, Gonzalo. Connected. Sean adds worked harder. Warm and friendly. Security, productivity. Thank you, Juan. Motivation and happiness. CJ adds motivated. Melanie adds makes me feel like my perspective matters. Warming and fun. Thank you, Martha. Carla. Thank you, Miho. Trusted. Wonderful words. Wonderful words. Gonzalo. Validated. Wonderful word. And Irene says, looking forward to going to work every day. That's the power that we have as leaders. And as I've continued to coach leaders and what I see as coaching in the future, I see it focusing on creating this environment, which is why I wrote the book that I wrote, because every bit of the content of the book is equipping leaders to create this environment. I have a couple of phrases that I use throughout the book. An uncaring leader causes what I call a life-draining environment. When you consider the words that you saw in the chat box, think about how that made you feel when I asked the question. Think about the words that showed up, and as you read them, what did that do within your body? For most of us, it makes us deflated. It makes us contract and feel like we need to protect ourselves physically. But then think about the change in our body when we ask the second question about working with a caring leader. And I say that that creates a life-giving environment where we're sitting up straighter. We're feeling better about ourselves, about life. We're wanting to go in to work and do great things. And the words that you wrote in the chat box were an example of that. And even as we read those words that other people were writing, we felt better about life. And leaders have this amazing power to do that and responsibility to do that as well. And as coaches, we have the opportunity to open leaders' eyes to that effect that they can have, that positive effect that they can have. There's a balanced, mindful caring model that I created in my book. I'll hold it up to the screen here. Oops. Actually, I'm going to have to turn off my, hang on just a moment. I'm going to have to turn off my background settings. There we go. So there's the balanced, mindful caring model. I'll try to hold it here still on the screen. And the balance is caring for the others, the individuals who are within your care, placing focused energy on caring for them. Next is caring for the group, focused energy on caring for the group affiliations. This could be your team. This could be your family. This could be your friend group, your community groups. Next is caring for the work, focused energy on caring for the important work that does need to get done. And lastly is caring for the self, focused energy on caring for the needs of the self. When you look at this quadrant, these 4 quadrants, caring for others, caring for the group, caring for the work, and caring for the self, where do you think that most leaders place their attention in your experience? Where are most leaders placing their attention? Melanie starts with caring for the work. Sakti adds care for the self and the work. Yeah, work, 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 Martha says. And it's the old style. Leaders have been trained for decades and decades, perhaps centuries, to care for the work. And early in my coaching career, that's what the focus was on. How can I help this client to better care for the work, to better get things done, which will help their career? Now I'm spending more and more of my time helping people with caring for the self. So where do you think that people, leaders, place the least amount of care in their life? Go ahead and write your thoughts in the chat box. Where do leaders place the least amount of focused energy in these 4 quadrants? Yeah, Martha says self. Melanie adds self. Yeah, Sakti says others. Irene says self. Yeah. Carla says self. I've asked this question to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, and the majority say that leaders spend the least amount of time caring for the self. And then we spend time within the coaching exploring that. On the back side of the model is a little worksheet that I have leaders do, where they write down where they are placing their focused energy. And as they do that little worksheet, invariably, most of them say, oh, I don't have much in the self. I have a lot in work. I do have a decent amount in others. We talk about the group aspect because there's a nuance between caring for others and caring for the group. But they make that realization that caring for the self is not receiving much focused energy. So then we explore in the coaching environment what that means and what is the effect of that lack of self-care. So I know I'm running out of time. Apologies for the length, but I'll just wrap up by saying my view for the coaching in the future is that we will be spending more and more time helping people to find this balance. Because when they care for the self and place enough self-care, it will naturally translate into better caring for others, better caring for the group, and ultimately better caring for the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Excellent presentation, very inspiring. I think we are all going to realize how much really self-care we're having ourselves as coaches as well. Interesting your thoughts around how we may feel or think that we're people-centered as leaders, but we are people-centered to get things done versus being people-centered to really impact the lives of others and to help everyone achieve a higher purpose. So, great insight, because I think as leaders, we all have that responsibility of helping. And I think the 3 panelists today have been really aligned on the topic of how the self-awareness of a leader can help understand their values, can help them understand to be compassionate to others, and help them understand that if I take care of myself, I can then take care of others, because no one can give something that they don't have. So very aligned, very interesting topics, the 3. I would like to ask everyone who is here and who have questions for the panelists to please write them in the chat so we can, answer all your questions. And I'm probably going to start with a couple of questions. And Gillian, I would like to ask you how coaches can work on their own values so they can too become better coaching leaders.
Yo quiero decir que la primera cosa que tenemos que hacer cada uno de los
I'd like to
coaches
say that the first thing that we coaches should be is having our own coaches and having our own process that allows us to balance the the field and know what it's really about. It's difficult to understand that a coach doesn't receive coaching. At least for me, it's difficult to understand. And one of the things that has to do with this, and basically that coaches wear a resonance box. And one of the things that I aim to have personally is to try to work with dissonance close to zero, meaning that which I promote is part of my day to day. So the fact that we promote coaching and promote conversations that are brave implies that we participate of those conversations as the other side of the coin, and there's a necessary intellectual entity in coaches to constitute ourselves as that which we preach about.
Interesting because I think as coaches we may forget sometimes get our own coaching supervisor or just coaching for ourselves for our lives. And excellent approach. We have a question from the panel. Marcela asked for Betsy, based on your experience and your vision, which are some of the soft skills for a better world in the future? In that we coaches need to have conscious to guide our clients.
Gracias a Marcela por esa interesante pregunta.
Thank you, Marcela, for that interesting question. I would believe that facing a new era that we're looking at where this technological advancement, accelerated technological advancements and exponential technologies, I think it would be interesting to start developing competencies and abilities and being conscious about it, a mentality that's totally open to innovation, a mentality that breaks that orthodoxy, that we can have that critical thinking of being able to understand. The second ability that I think it's also necessary from my perspective is perspective. Develop a level of perspective that's mature enough to understand what we're living. I was saying a while ago that never before in the present has been so temporary as nowadays. And that means that what before took 10 years, 5 years in being held as a belief, nowadays it's totally temporary. Anything we think. So developing that multi-perspective focus on leaders, it's going to really help the organizations to be able to understand that quadrant of complexity where we are having the organizations navigate through. And perhaps a third ability that is more of a soft skill as how we can categorize it. And it is the leadership that's a lot more compassionate. But above all, taking a little bit from Brian, listening and from his book, understanding that this self-care starts with the leader itself. And in the old school of leadership, we hadn't been set to understand that care starts here, starts in me. So I think we have a fascinating opportunity as coaches to help leaders in organizations to understand their humanity, to understand their imperfection, to understand their emotions. And this really gives me hope, so we can contribute in that way and not to pour it over the space and the questions. I think those would be the three main focuses: mentality of innovation for a challenging world that will not change. That's not going to change how I want it, but where it's going. And that perspective and compassionate leadership.
Thank you so much, Betsy. for Brian as well. It says, is a hiring manager seen as a weak or vulnerable leader, or is he or she considered too soft? What is your experience?
That's a good question, Sarav. When it came in and I read it, I smiled because that's the
Es una buena
question
pregunta,
I've
porque
gotten
es la
since
pregunta
I've
que he
been.
recibido
Let's see, I'm
desde que,
hearing the other translation. So
de
let me
que,
switch to the original.
un momento, déjenme, estoy escuchando las otras traducciones.
I've been reading
Pero sí, he estado
the
recibiendo esa pregunta
and as Betsy
mucho.
just mentioned, there's old style leadership, and old style
Y hay
leadership
el
led
estilo antiguo de liderazgo que lideraba con fuerza, que venía de la milicia a través del mundo. Y ese es como el modelo de liderazgo se formó y por los últimos 100 años y en los últimos años se ha necesitado en las organizaciones de todo tipo, hemos tenido esta aceptación.
Exactly what Betsy was just sharing, being a compassionate leader, being an empathetic leader. And with each decade, we seem to have more and more research that supports that. There was a recent study done by the Catalyst Group here in the States, and they specialize in research that focuses on women leadership. And they did a survey where they found that 76% of people with highly empathic or empathetic leaders are engaged at work. There's more studies out there that show that an empathetic mindset of a leader actually increases engagement, increases happiness at work, increases effectiveness at work. Ernst & Young Consulting did a survey where 90% of U.S. workers believe that empathetic leadership leads to higher job satisfaction. 88% say it creates loyalty. 79% say it decreases turnover. So the science is there that shows that this new, more empathetic form of leadership definitely works. And what I've tried to do is frame it in such a way that that those who do have more of a mentality of being a strong, forceful person, that's their core personality, that they create an understanding where that will be fine leadership for those who share that same personality or those same behavioral traits. But for those who do not share those traits, you as a leader need to flex to understand that to reach them in the way they need to be reached, you need to adjust your leadership to what may be felt as a softer form of leadership. So hopefully that helps to answer the question.
Yes, definitely does, Brian. And we have another very interesting question here, and it's open to any of you who would like to answer it. From Gendry, she's asking, what learnings have you had by volunteering at the IAC, and what would you recommend to those who wish to be leaders of IAC in the future in terms of leadership? How would you tell them? Gillian, go ahead.
Me gustaría decir que
I would like to
liderar
say that leading in IAC is taking your leadership to another level. And let me explain it this way. All of us that haven't at any time or another had leadership roles and have been leading a volunteer organization, we find a totally different perspective. Because when you lead a volunteer organization, it really is about calling on wills. And from there, we operate from three important characteristics. First, commitment. Second, purpose. And number three, inspiration. So calling on volunteers at the same time means molding yourself as a leader that has to have very high levels of empathy and very high levels of humanity to be able to contemplate all the circumstances that could happen. I think that leading an organization in this sense means becoming a master, additionally to everything we knew about leadership before that. Thank you, Ingrid. I would like to add to what Gillian mentioned, that for me, leading in IAC is an act of love and service. If if you don't have the intention, if you're not being intentional of in serving from that place, it's very hard to advance in an organization that has to be very horizontal, very open, very democratic, very volunteer. I have a motto when about we shared it with all my peers, my colleagues. In IAC, volunteering is not the time that you can spare, but it's the time that you dedicate to things that matter to you. Leading in IAC, I think, is that for all of us that have gone through this, activates us. It reaffirms that purpose of the things that matter to us in coaching and in the future of coaching.
Thank you, Betsy. And we have here another question. This question is we have one for Brian, which is, what are your thoughts around the coaching supervision to start that road of self-reflection and becoming a coach or a better coach, be more compassionate with ourselves, because at the end, that compassion that Betsy was talking about, it's about that self-care too. So what are your thoughts around that coaching supervision?
Yeah, great question. I've had supervisors off and on through the years, and I've always found that it provides that additional perspective, especially with those coaching clients who I'm struggling with. As coaches, we're never going to have that perfect situation where we completely understand and can completely reach the coachee in the way that we need to. And I have had some coaching engagements where I feel like I'm not reaching the coachee the way that they need to be reached. And in those situations, when I've had a supervisor or a mentor, I've been able to turn to them and get their perspective and say, this is the situation and this is what I'm struggling with. And so often they've been able to provide that altering perspective based on their experience, based on a previous client who they've worked with, who was having the same struggle or the same challenge or the same obstacle. And they have helped me to approach the situation in a new way. Gillian mentioned earlier in the session that we all need coaches. We are coaches, but we all need coaches as well. So keeping that supervision or a mentor in place throughout our coaching career is a wonderful way to continue to grow and to learn as a coach.
Great. I would like to ask the three of you, why do you think it has been so hard? And this is my perspective, that it's of what I see in the organizations. It's hard for leaders to be more caring and more compassionate. Why is it hard to shift from work focus to people and well-being of that people and myself? What are those what would you call them, energies that they have to it's like a battle at the end, to be more caring in an organization and less work focus?
Well, I have thoughts, but I would love to hear Gillian's and Betsy's feelings about this. You're muted, Gillian.
No, decía que apliquemos
What I
la...
was saying is that we can apply the that motto of ladies first. Okay. In the end, the ball is mine. Very good. So this is a beautiful question, Ingrid, and I really appreciate that you put it on the table. I think that the three of us can add different perspectives based on our experiences, our sectors, and our audience as well. I'd like to have that questions to go out to the audience. If you could write in the chat what it is that you see as difficulty. I think that question leads me to think in three different areas, perhaps, to summarize it from my perspective. One is history. Yeah, the history of humanity from a factor of creation of generation of value from a capitalist value perspective, and that made it definitely that the orientation of organizations and leadership to go towards productivity from that perspective. That wasn't a bad thing when it happened. In fact, the Industrial Revolution emerges as a product of wars, of the lack of provisioning worldwide when we had to produce. So the era of production was important at that point. But something happened in that area that really stuck into our DNA, and schools and education started working from that. And that takes me to the second point, education. The education that we're giving, the impact that this education is having historically, it's had throughout the years a tendency towards production in business, production of results. Even we associate this to intelligence and education also from home, not only academia, from home, education where they've taught us that to have, to show is a condition of success in life. If, keeping that, so that starts generating this mental maps that leads us to believe, to have certain paradigms. And the third thing I would say from my perspective is strategy. Until the day in which human beings, human-centric is not part of the core of the strategy of business, it will be very difficult to be able to guide or orient a more fluid, more effective, and a faster way leadership towards that. For me, there's a dissonance in organizations within what they aspire, believe, want, the tendency, the fad, and what is happening in the real core of the organization. And that has to do with strategy.
And your thoughts came to me about that topic, and what I hear you say is at the end, the systemic approach is it actually involves also the family, because if we as families, and we can coach families in this sense too, can raise caring people, they will become more caring leaders. And as long as organizations understand that higher purpose is necessary, they will guide their leaders to become that, and to be less afraid to being self-aware. Sometimes people are a bit reluctant to do that self-awareness exercise. So when the companies help and the families help, definitely things are going to be shaped for better future for everyone. Excellent.
Claro.
So with this,
Yo
we're
solamente agregaría dos cosas.
yeah, go ahead.
A
I
ver,
would
el
only add two things.
concepto del
So the
líder
concept of
que
leader
tiene poder
that has power
ha sido transformado.
has
Sin
been
embargo,
transformed,
aún permanece en la
but
cultura de
it
muchas
still
empresas
remains in the culture of many
que el
companies
líder
that
tiene poder.
authoritarian leader,
Lo
that
otro
leader
es
that
el
has power.
enfoque sobre los
The other thing is
indicadores
that the
y
focus on the
cultura.
indicators,
Absolutamente
performance
tóxico
indicators
porque
create
vamos por el
toxic
resultado
cultures because we're going
por
after the
resultado.
result
Entonces,
just for
en
the
el
result
medio
itself.
quedan
So in
corazones
the middle, we
en la
leave
carretera.
hearts
¿Ok?
down the
Con
road.
esto lo que quiero decir es que, a ver,
And what I mean with this
cuando
is
se empieza a transformar y se empieza a decir,
when we
bueno,
start
vamos a crear un
transforming
buen
and saying,
clima,
well, we're going to
vamos a crear un
create a
buen
good
ambiente,
climate, we're going
porque
to
eso
try to
aumenta
work on a good
la
environment because that
personalidad,
increases in
hipocresía.
productivity.
La razón por
That's
la que debemos
hypocrisy as well. The reason for
generar
which we should
ambientes de
generate
seguridad
environments
y
of
de,
safety,
a ver,
security,
estabilidad
and
emocional de los
emotional
trabajadores
stability at work
desde
is
la
because
condición de ser humano,
from the
donde
condition of
respetamos
human
unos a
beings,
otros
we
y de esa
respect each
condición
other's. And from
pasamos
that condition,
mucho tiempo
we
haciendo
spend a lot
cosas
of time
juntos que necesitan ser
doing things
consideradas
together that
como
need to be
extremadamente
considered as
integrales.
part of an
Entonces,
integral
a ver,
life.
cuando
So
vamos a procurar el
when
equilibrio,
we're
porque eso nos va a
striving
dar
for
mejores
balance
resultados,
because that's going to
simplemente
give us
hacemos
better
una
results,
política
we're just
hipócrita.
doing a hypocritical practice when the leader has the capacity of considering himself a human being and considering their peers as human beings just as him. We've really started to connect to generate productivity from a perspective that's balanced, ethical, and
Thank you.
well thought.
Go ahead, Brian.
And I would just like to add, I think it comes down to fear. We all fear things, and the leaders who cannot transition from that authoritative control to more of a caring environment, when I work with them, ultimately I get down to that question of, what do you fear? What are you afraid of? What is this triggering within you? And it could come from a lot of different places, which we won't get into now. But ultimately, I think it comes from some sort of fear basis.
Excellent. So excellent insight. So we can coach better our leaders, ourselves, and shape the future. Thank you so much. We are at the end of this session. I want to invite everyone to please turn on your cameras. We would like to take a picture of today's event. So don't be shy. We're all humans, as we have heard today. So let's have a big smile. And if you're able to put your hearts as well, go ahead and put them so we can see all the energy and love present here today. Carla, are you taking the picture?
1 minute, please, to a screenshot. Smile. Great smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Excellent presentation. I would like to ask everyone a big round of applause for our panelists today. Definitely have shared very interesting opinions and thoughts. And I would like to invite you for tomorrow's School of Buddies, same time. And we're going to be here all week. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow as well.
The International Association of Coaching. Home of the coaching masteries.